The circumstance of spiders of the same species, but of different sexes and ages, being found on several occasions at the distance of many leagues from the land, attached in vast numbers to the lines, proves that they are the manufacturers of the mesh, and that the habit of sailing through the air is probably as characteristic of some tribe as that of diving is of the Argyroneta. We may then reject Littrell's supposition that the gossamer owes its origin to the webs of this young of several genera, as Apira or Temesa, although, as we have seen, that the young of other spiders do possess the power of performing aerial voyages. During our different passages south of the Plata, I often towed astern a net made of bunting, and thus caught many curious animals. The structure of the burrow, a kind of jellyfish, is most extraordinary, with its rows of vibratory cilia and complicated through irregular system of circulation. Of crustacea there were many strange and undescribed genera. One which in some respects is allied to the notopods, or those crabs which have their posterior legs placed almost on their backs, for the purpose of adhering to the underside of ledges, is very remarkable from the structure of its hind pair of legs. The penultimate joint, instead of being terminated by a simple claw, ends in 3 bristle-like appendages of dissimilar lengths, the longest equaling that of an entire leg. These claws are very thin, and are serrated with teeth of an excessive fineness, which are directed towards the base. The curved extremities are flattened, and on this part 5 most minute cups are placed, which seem to act in the same manner as the suckers on the arms of the cuttlefish. As the animal lives in the open sea, and probably wants a place of rest, I suppose this beautiful structure is adapted to take hold of the globular bodies of the medusae and other floating marine animals. In deep water, far from the land, the number of living creatures is extremely small. South of the latitude of 35 degrees, I never succeeded in catching anything besides some burrow and a few species of minute crustacea belonging to the Entomostraca. In shallower water, at the distance a few miles from the coast, very many kinds of crustacea and some other animals were numerous, but only during the night. Between latitudes 56 and 57 south of Cape Horn, the net was put astern several times. It never, however, brought up anything besides a few of 2 extremely minute species of Entomostraca. Yet whales and seals, petrels and albatross are exceedingly abundant throughout this part of the ocean. It has always been a source of mystery to me on what the latter, which live far from the shore, can subsist. I presume the albatross, like the condor, is able to fast long, and that one good feast on the carcass of a putrid whale lasts for a long siege of hunger. It does not lessen the difficulty to say they feed on fish, for on what the fish can feed. It often occurred to me when observing how the waters of the central and intertropical parts of the Atlantic swarmed with pteropoda, crustacea, and rhodacea, and with their devourers, the flying fish, and again with their devourers, the bonitos and albacores, that the lowest of these pelagic animals perhaps possess the power of decomposing carbonic acid gas, like the members of the vegetable kingdom. While sailing in these latitudes on one very dark night, the sea presented a wonderful and most beautiful spectacle. There was a fresh breeze, and every part of the surface, which during the day is seen as foam, now glowed with a pale light. The vessel drove before her bows 2 billows of liquid phosphorus, and in her wake she was followed by a milky train. As far as the eye reached, the crest of every wave was bright, and the sky above the horizon, from the reflected glare of these livid flames, was not so utterly obscure as over the rest of the heavens. As we proceed further southward, the sea is seldom phosphorescent, and off Cape Horn I do not recollect more than once having seen it so, and then it was far from being brilliant. The circumstance probably has a close connection with the scarcity of organic beings in that part of the ocean. After the elaborate paper by Ehrenberg on the phosphorescence of the sea, it is almost superfluous on my part to make any observations on the subject. I may, however, add that the same torn and irregular particles of gelatinous matter described by Ehrenberg seem in the southern as well as in the northern hemisphere to be the common cause of this phenomenon. The particles were so minute as easily to pass through fine gauze, yet many were distinctly visible by the naked eye. The water, when placed in a tumbler and agitated, gave out sparks, but a small portion in a watch glass scarcely ever was luminous. Ehrenberg states that these particles all retain a certain degree of irritability. My observations, some of which were made directly after taking up the water, would give a different result. I may also mention that having used the net during one night, I allowed it to become partially dry, and having occasion 12 hours afterwards to employ it again, I found the whole surface sparkled as brightly as when first taken out of the water. It does not appear probable in this case that the particles could have remained so long alive. I remark also in my notes that having kept a Medusa of the genus Danaea till it was dead, the water in which it was placed became luminous. When the waves scintillate with bright green sparks, I believe it is generally owing to minute crustacea, but there can be no doubt that very many other pelagic animals, when alive, are phosphorescent. On 2 occasions, I have observed the sea luminous at considerable depths beneath the surface. Near the mouth of the Plata, some circular and oval patches, from 2 to 4 yards in diameter, and with defined outlines, shone with a steady but pale light, while the surrounding water only gave out a few sparks. The appearance resembled the reflection of the moon, or some luminous body, for the edges were sinuous from the undulation of the surface. The ship, which drew 13 feet of water, passed over without disturbing these patches. Therefore, we must suppose that some animals were congregated together at a greater depth than the bottom of the vessel. Near Fernando Noronha, the sea gave out light in flashes. The appearance was very similar to that which might be expected from a large fish moving rapidly through a luminous fluid. To this cause the sailors attributed it. At the time, however, I entertained some doubts on account of the frequency and rapidity of the flashes. With respect to any general observations, I have already stated that the display is very much more common in warm than in cold countries. I have sometimes imagined that a disturbed electrical condition of the atmosphere was most favorable to its production. Certainly, I think the sea is most luminous after a few days of more calm weather than ordinary, during which time it has swarmed with various animals. Observing that the water changed with gelatinous particles is in an impure state, and that the luminous appearance in all common cases is produced by the agitation of the fluid in contact with the atmosphere, I have always been inclined to consider that phosphorescence was the result of decomposition of the organic particles, by which process one is tempted almost to call it kind of respiration. the ocean becomes purified.